Okay, let's set a scene. You or someone you care about needs the hospital, your local hospital, but you hear whispers. Things aren't right with the management. Do you still trust them? Well, today, we're diving deep into exactly that kind of situation.
Right.
It's happening at Morehouse General Hospital, MGH. We're looking at the whole picture. The hospital, its managing company, this Community Hospital Corporation, or CHC, and the leadership involved. We've got a stack of sources here, reports, tough questions someone wanted asked, analyses of who's in charge. Our job is to unpack it all. We want to understand the root problems, how they spread, and what big decisions the community is facing now.
Yeah, we'll be looking closely at how the money side, the leadership choices, and the basic rules of governance all kind of mesh together, or maybe clash.
Right.
Especially critical when you're talking about a rural hospital. These places are often lifelines, aren't they?
Absolutely, lifelines. Okay, so let's start unpacking. The first big piece seems to be MGH's deal with CHC, the management company. What's the core issue the sources point to?
Well, the really striking thing, the core issue, is that CHC itself, the company hired to manage MGH, is financially insolvent. We're talking over $11 million in the red, negative assets.
Wow.
So right away, you've got this massive conflict of interest. It's, the sources use this analogy, it's like asking a bankrupt advisor to manage your retirement fund. Their first thought has to be about their own survival, right? Not necessarily the hospital.
That's a powerful way to put it. So this isn't just like a bookkeeping error. The sources actually call it the mathematics of management failure. What does that mean?
Exactly. It's not just a technicality, it's fundamental. It's about basic business sense failing. And the irony is just, well, it's inescapable. CHC was brought in to fix MGH's money problems, but they couldn't fix their own. So the big question becomes, how can a company that failed financially itself possibly create financial stability for someone else? It just doesn't add up.
And didn't the sources mention something else? Something about the Cayman Islands, an insurance entity?
Yes, that's right. Community Health Assurance, SPC Ltd. It's a captive insurance entity based there. And, that immediately raises concerns about MGH's funds potentially flowing offshore. The reports basically describe it as financial engineering designed to benefit the management company rather than the managed institution. Pretty strong words.
Very strong. Okay, so CHC is insolvent. How does that, what's the ripple effect? The sources mentioned a cascade effect.
Right, the cascade effect. It touches everything.
Yeah.
When a company has negative assets like that, their focus inevitably shifts. They have to think short-term cash flow, just keeping things afloat day to day, long-term planning, strategic investment. That often goes out the window. And in healthcare, that's incredibly damaging. It hits patient safety, staff morale and retention, the community's trust in the hospital. It all starts to erode.
So let's make it real. What are the direct consequences for the hospital, and maybe more importantly for you, the people in the community who rely on it?
Well, the sources point to concrete things. Deferred maintenance, equipment not getting fixed, the building itself may be suffering, reduced staffing levels because they can't or won't fill open positions, even canceling necessary services. Things the community depends on.
So the community pays the price.
Ultimately, yes, through less access, maybe lower quality care, and it goes deeper. This kind of financial instability, it puts MGH's certifications at risk, its ability to participate in government programs, get federal funding. Think Medicare, Medicaid. Losing that, that could literally force a hospital closure, no matter how much the community needs it.
That's grim. And the reports warn this isn't just about MGH. They talk about a precedent problem and a competitive disadvantage for public contracts generally. What's that about?
It's about the bigger picture. If you let an insolvent company manage a public hospital, what message does that send? It sets a precedent that financial health isn't, a basic requirement that could attract other shaky contractors, and it messes up the whole procurement process. How can stable, responsible companies compete fairly?
Right, because the insolvent ones might bid super low just to get cash flow.
Exactly. They might underbid just because they're desperate. It creates this race to the bottom where quality and stability lose out.
It sounds like a recipe for disaster, really, letting unstable companies manage vital public services.
It is. And there's more. These financially unstable companies, they struggle to attract good staff. Vendors might not trust them. All of that creates inefficiencies and directly impacts the quality of patient care. Things a healthy organization wouldn't have to deal with.
Okay, so bringing it back specifically to Morehouse General. It's a rural hospital. How does all this land differently there?
That's the rural hospital imperative the sources talk about. These hospitals aren't just another option. Often, they're the only option for miles. Their stability is literally about community survival.
Because people in rural areas often have more chronic health issues and fewer ways to travel far for care.
Precisely. Higher rates of chronic disease, less transportation. Local access is everything. So the stakes are incredibly high. MGH can't afford to be like a guinea pig for an insolvent management company. The community deserves, needs partners who are financially stable, proven track records.
Okay, that paints a pretty clear picture of the management company issues. Now let's pivot to the leadership inside the hospital, specifically the CEO. The sources have this striking title, From Interim to Authority, how an outsider claims CEO status while dismantling community healthcare. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's quite a narrative. The reports detail how Todd Tamaluna seemed to transition from interim CEO on paper to just CEO, apparently without a formal vote by the board or any real community say in the matter.
So kind of a promotion by assumption.
It appears that way. And coupled with that, the sources describe his management style becoming increasingly authoritarian. Decisions made that suggest he felt his authority went far beyond what that original interim role implied.
And there's that quote, the reports mention a culture of fear and loyalty demands. Specifically, him telling staff, if he can't trust you, he does not need you. That sounds harsh, especially in healthcare.
It does, and it raises fundamental questions, Trust in a professional setting like a hospital, it should be earned through competence, transparency, demanding personal loyalty like that. It suggests maybe viewing the hospital less as a community asset to serve and more like a private company to control.
And he wanted to change the culture.
Yeah, his stated intention to change the culture of a rural community, almost framing the existing culture as the problem. It suggests a real disconnect, a lack of understanding about how rural healthcare actually works, the community ties involved.
Okay, let's talk about the Board of Commissioners. Because ultimately, oversight rests with them, right?
Yeah.
The sources lay out their duties pretty clearly. What are they supposed to be doing?
Right. As commissioners of a public hospital district, they hold a really significant public trust. The reports break it down into 3 core fiduciary duties. First, the duty of care. That means being diligent, showing up prepared, asking tough questions, acting prudently.
Okay, makes sense.
Second, the duty of loyalty. Their decisions have to be solely in the best interest of the hospital and the community. No conflicts, no other agendas.
Always the hospital first.
Always. And third, the duty of obedience. Making sure everything follows the law, the regulations, and importantly, the hospital district's own bylaws and rules. Their job is governance, oversight. Not running the hospital day to day, but making sure it's run properly.
Got it. Now, this deep dive includes a list of accountability and oversight questions. Very specific questions someone apparently wanted the board to answer. They really seem to zero in on potential gaps. Let's look at a few. The most basic one. Why hire a financially insolvent management company in the first place? That hits the duty of care head on, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's the $1 million question, or maybe the $11 million question in this case. It demands a real explanation of their due diligence. What homework did they do? What possible benefit could have outweighed such a massive, obvious risk? Did they act prudently?
Then there's this question about a $35,000 fee. For canceling a contract the board apparently never even voted on. What does that tell us about oversight?
Well, if that's accurate, it raises serious red flags about how contracts and money are being handled. It challenges their oversight role, their duty of care regarding finances. Are proper procedures for a public body being followed?
And transparency comes up too. Questions about why the hospital website is out of date. And even whether specific board members, like Susan Plonnings, got all the necessary info before a key meeting back in February 2025.
Yeah, transparency is crucial for any public entity. An outdated website that looks like a lapse in basic communication, basic accountability to the public. And if information isn't flowing properly within the board, if some members don't have what they need, well, they can't make informed decisions. That undermines the whole governance structure.
Okay, this next area is critical. The CEO's qualifications. The sources really question if his certification, the ACPME, is actually sufficient for a hospital CEO, especially when compared to something like the FACE credential. This section is called the ACPME qualification gap. What's the gap?
It's a significant difference in focus and scope. The ACMPE certification is designed for managing a medical practice, like a doctor's office or clinic group. It focuses on the business side, finance, HR, operations within that setting.
Okay.
Crucially, it explicitly excludes clinical decision-making, direct oversight of patient care, things requiring medical expertise. The educational path and experience required are well, they're less rigorous than for the FACHE Fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives.
And ACHE is more geared towards overall hospital leadership.
Exactly. FACH typically requires a master's degree, years of broad healthcare management experience. It's designed for comprehensive leadership of a complex organization like a hospital. The ACMPE just isn't the same thing.
So what's the big deal? What are the real-world implications if the CEO doesn't have that clinical oversight background or the broader hospital management credential, especially thinking about patient safety?
That's the core concern. Research actually shows a correlation. CEOs with clinical backgrounds often lead hospitals with better patient outcomes. When you have someone in the top spot whose expertise is primarily administrative, like with ACMPE, there's a risk. Who's ultimately responsible for clinical standards and decisions? There's a potential blurring of lines. And studies do show administrative decisions, when disconnected from clinical reality, can contribute to errors, to adverse events.
And there are regulations about this, right?
Absolutely. Federal regs, like 42 CFR Part 482, are clear. Clinical decisions must be made by licensed clinicians. If that separation gets fuzzy, patient safety can suffer, and that risk is maybe even higher in a rural hospital.
Why is that?
Well, they often have fewer layers of management, maybe fewer specialists on hand. Decisions about emergency care, patient transfers, they need to happen fast, and they need to be clinically sound. You need clear lines of clinical authority.
Okay. The sources also touch on ethical questions surrounding some board members, Susan Plonnings, Mario Bershell, showing public support for the CEO when there was so much uncertainty. And this odd detail about canceling the Bastrop newspaper subscription, maybe to avoid tough questions.
Right. As public officials, their primary loyalty is to the community and the hospital district. So public displays of unwavering support, especially when serious questions are being raised, that could look like a lack of objectivity. It could undermine the board's role as an impartial overseer.
And the newspaper thing?
Well, if true, any attempt to limit access to information or, shut down critical press coverage, that goes against the whole idea of open government and public trust, doesn't it?
It certainly seems to. Lastly, the board's own housekeeping comes under scrutiny. Do their bylaws actually match how they run meetings? And what about training for the board members themselves?
Yeah, following their own rules, the bylaws, that's fundamental governance 101. If there are discrepancies, they need to either fix their practices or review their policies. And effective oversight isn't easy. It really requires board members to understand healthcare finance, operations, quality measures, regulations. It's complex stuff.
So they need training.
Ideally, yes, or at least demonstrate that competence. The sources pose a really blunt question here, basically asking if the board's inaction on these issues boils down to complicity, complacency, or just incompetence.
That's stark.
Yeah.
It really puts the pressure on them. Now, connecting some threads, the sources point out a really interesting, maybe troubling shift with Susan Plonnings, described once as a community accountability champion, someone who apparently had evidence of CHC taking money out, but now seen as a CHE supporter, even standing alongside the CEO.
That reversal is, well, it's puzzling and concerning, according to these documents, especially if she previously had hard evidence of what the sources call CHC's extractive practices. Going from that position to publicly backing the current setup, it reads like a betrayal of that earlier accountability stance, and it undermines the community members who are trying to protect the hospital's resources.
The sources use pretty strong language here, too. Incompetent board's enabling role, even police jury's apparent destruction. What's the takeaway about how this impacts the hospital's future?
The conclusion drawn in these reports is that the board's continued support for CHC, despite all these red flags, suggests their priorities might be misplaced. Maybe prioritizing the relationship with the contractor over the welfare of the community and the hospital's long-term health.
A failure of governance.
A fundamental failure of governance, yes. It erodes public trust and really puts the hospital's sustainability at risk. And if the police jury, which should be another layer of oversight, is also seen as supporting this arrangement, that looks like another failure, a failure of local government to protect a vital community asset.
Wow. It sounds like a perfect storm of problems. But amidst all this dysfunction, the sources make a point of mentioning the actual healthcare providers. The doctors, the nurses, the staff, they're still there, fighting against all odds.
Yes, and that's a really important counterpoint. It highlights their commitment. Their dedication to patient care to the community seems to stand in stark contrast to this model of alleged corporate extraction by CHC and the CEO's approach. Their work really embodies that true spirit of rural healthcare. It's about serving the community, not just the bottom line.
So, bringing it all together, where does this leave the community? The sources frame it starkly as the community's choice. What's the choice?
Well, the conclusion presented is pretty blunt. Morehouse Parish is at a crossroads. Do they continue down this path, accepting what the sources describe as a destructive extraction model that's harming their hospital? Or do they stand up, demand accountability, demand transparency, demand new leadership, both management and potentially board oversight, that genuinely prioritizes community healthcare above contractor profits?
The stakes couldn't be higher, really.
Exactly. The survival of their local healthcare, it seems, hangs directly in the balance based on the information we've reviewed.
So this deep dive, it's uncovered a really tangled situation at Morehouse General. Financial insolvency in the management, serious questions about the CEO's leadership and qualifications, and major gaps in board accountability.
Yeah, we've really seen how these high-level decisions, who manages the hospital, who leads it, how the board governs, they have incredibly real consequences, not just for the budget, but for the actual health and well-being of everyone in that rural community.
It underscores just how huge the responsibility is for people overseeing public institutions like hospitals. It's not just another business.
Absolutely. So maybe the final thought for you listening, what stands out to you from all this? Think about it. We're drowning in information these days, right? But how much do we, just as regular citizens, really need to dig into how our local government works, especially when it involves something as essential as healthcare? What happens? What are the real costs when we don't pay close enough attention?